So it's the end of the year, and not just that, but the end of a whole decade. It's crazy how 2010 seems like yesterday, and yet I can't remember anything about it. Like everybody else, I've been looking back at the last decade, reflecting on who I was when it started, who I am now, how far I've come, looking at all my pictures, my social media, God help me, and it occurred to me that the last 2 decades have been very distinct phases for me. The 2000s are when I left Jehovah's Witnesses. I left in 2004. And after that, I was a total POMI. I hadn't woken up yet. I just thought that I wasn't good enough for Jehovah's Witnesses. I was going to die in Armageddon anyway, so I might as well live it up while I can and just, die when I die. I went totally wild. It was a lot of little things that led to me eventually waking up. And while I was looking back at everything over this last decade, I think I found the moment where it finally happened. I was an avid live journaler. Back in 2011, I made my first attempt to tell my story. So I thought it would be fun to go back and look at it, give it a read, and talk about where I was when I finally came to this realization. So I made this post here, Life Without End at Last. Prior to this post, I didn't really like talking about the religion very much. If I brought it up, it was usually on the context of what was going on with my family, them kicking me out and shunning me and then bringing me back and then kicking me out again and all of this crazy stuff. I swear the 2000s was just the decade of drama for me. If people that commented talked about the religion or attacked it, I got kind of defensive about it. So putting up this post was huge for me because it was like a second coming out to finally talk about the religion itself and what it had done to me. All right, for some random fork-hearted reason, I had an old Jehovah's Witness song stuck in my head today. I wonder which one that could be. Well, I guess not entirely random. Up until now, I've been doing well at not thinking about it and leaving it in the past. Life is a lot easier when I'm not fretting over what-ifs, but then one of my regulars at work found out that I'm an ExJW. At the same time, I found out she is a current JW. Of course, this resulted in a flurry of unwelcome JW publications, encouragement, and invitations sent in my direction. I'm not exactly sure how to handle this, since on the one hand, she refuses to accept "I'm not really interested" as an answer, and on the other, she requests me frequently and tips me well. She did. She requested me. I had her just about every day. She sat in my section for hours. Hours and hours and hours she would be there. She basically paid for my car insurance every month, like I said there. So it kind of makes it difficult to justify pissing her off, but I can't think of any way but being rude to her to get her to back off. After all, I used to be that person, and that's usually what it took. And then suddenly, everyone finds my JW past fascinating and wants to tell my story all the time. I don't really know what's up with all this, but I've got Jehovah on the brain. So this was really uncomfortable for me. I worked in, if you didn't gather already, I worked in a restaurant. It was a breakfast place, the kind of place that lives off of their regulars. There's tons of regulars that come in every day, and probably our most notorious regular turned out to be a Jehovah's Witness. And I think this came out because she got a tablet when the witnesses started their tablet stuff, and she was showing it to everybody and showing them JW.org, and one of my coworkers was like, "Oh, wow, Jeremy used to be a Jehovah's Witness." And this was like, oh my gosh, I could have strangled him. It was the same to me as, when you're gay and someone doesn't know that you're gay and somebody else outs you to that person without giving you the choice to do it yourself. That's what it was like. I did not want her to know that I was a witness. And of course, the moment she found out, she was relentless. Memorial invites, all this. She started exclusively requesting me, and I just couldn't shake her. And on top of that, all of my coworkers could see how uncomfortable I was with all of it, and they wanted to know more. They wanted to dig in. They wanted to know about my past. They wanted to know, why aren't I Jehovah's Witness anymore? What happened? And I'd never told my story before. I didn't want to tell my story. I just wanted to wait tables, make money, and go home. So all of this happens, and continuing on here, somehow I found myself looking up Jehovah's Witness songs being covered on YouTube and feeling nostalgic about it. Their songs are naively optimistic, so hopeful. Maybe it's just because I was raised with them, but it's difficult keeping from being swept in it. You can see the POMI me coming out here. Then I read some of the comments of those cover videos about the person doing the covering. And I quoted one of the comments here. I still remember this comment because the guy that was singing the song in the video, he had long hair, I think, kind of dressed like a hippie, like he was a POMI. He was another POMI. Comment said, "Sorry if this offends you, but you sound more like someone whose hair is far more important to him than the image you present to others as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Over the years, I have watched hundreds conform their life to reflect Jehovah's standard rather than expecting Jehovah's organization to lower their standards to yours." Jesus. And I remember that this is a Jehovah's Witness' entire life, conforming, sacrificing something new every day because nothing is ever good enough for Jehovah or for anyone else. In this fellow's case, he was using his creative energy to praise God, but it wasn't good enough because of his hair. In my case, I looked all right, but I was going to be killed in Armageddon because I wasn't using my creative energy to praise God. That being my writing. I did get a lot of counseling, and I was shut down a lot because I wanted to be a writer, but I wasn't writing for Jehovah. I wanted to write fiction, not Watchtower, so I had to adjust what I wanted to do there and change it to wanting to write for Watchtower. When I tried to conform, I was still looking at Armageddon because I forking liked Star Wars, or I didn't put enough hours into field service. I wasn't commenting enough at the meetings. I didn't have enough highlights in my Watchtower. I wasn't examining the scriptures daily with every breakfast. I wasn't a pioneer. I gave up my dream of going to Bethel. I had thoughts of going to college. I wasn't baptized. So despite going to all 3 meetings a week, cutting off my writing because I couldn't think of anything to write about Jehovah, and dropping out of public school to avoid worldly influence, and the end is coming any day now, well, so who needs school anyway? My friends were instructed to shun me despite all of this, and they did. Beyond this, I was utterly mortified as everybody was shutting me out, because the end was just around the corner, and I had precious little time left to get my act together. So the next part, I kind of complain a little. I complain about how I did throw so many things away to conform, but I still found myself crying in my empty bedroom because I thought a brother in my congregation was handsome. After achieving their vision of a perfect Jehovah's Witness, I still wasn't good enough. I could play their game to the point of suppressing every sexual thought I had, but no matter what, inevitably, I would wake up from a dream that reminded me I'm still a homosexual and I will never make it into paradise. You can't control your dreams, people. I've tried. Suddenly, I was 18 and finally gave up. I left the religion and found myself an adult without an education because I was told that pursuing one was pointless. I had no friends because only JW relationships were worth cultivating. Everyone else was going to die after all. And to this day, I have difficulty with my sexuality because I can't get rid of that voice in my head telling me that it's wrong. All those years being told that I was inadequate, and I opened my eyes to finally realize that I was being cultivated specifically to be inadequate for anything but being a Jehovah's Witness. I was a child, helpless in a world I had no idea how to live in. Sometimes I feel like I still am. And the worst part is that even after all these years, my first impulse is to go back. Go back to the Kingdom Hall where it's safe. That's the part that really scares me. That's, I was still like teetering on the edge of POMI at this point. And this was 7 years? This was 7 years after I'd actually left. And I'm still having these thoughts. Even after all of this writing, I'm still thinking about going back to a Kingdom Hall because I still think that's the only safe place to be. Indoctrination, man. A part of me suspects that Michael Jackson experienced something similar, but to a heightened degree due to his high profile, as evidenced by the disclaimer he was pressured into inserting in the Thriller video and his public apology for the video in Awake. After they demanded he prevent distribution of the video in other countries, and simultaneously disfellowshipped his sister, he left. And while he saw a successful career, it's clear that he was never quite able to find his place with the rest of the world. He was able to create a place set aside for him, Neverland, his paradise, but even there he couldn't escape Jehovah's grasp. I remember seeing a video of his very first Christmas arranged for him by Elizabeth Taylor, and he said that he sat in the bathroom and cried later that night because he felt that he did something terrible by taking part in it. I know exactly how he feels. That voice never goes away. You can see a lot about me unraveling here. Like I did end up making a video about Michael Jackson. And it's weird. Michael Jackson was always like a huge pivotal figure in my life, even though I wasn't really into his music. Like it was kind of taboo to really listen to his music anyway, so I just didn't go there. But I did always admire him because he, I knew what he went through, but I also saw what he had made for himself. He'd been successful. So much of what I wanted was just to be able to have my freedom to create and be successful at creating. And I was constantly being told no. So he was kind of a role model for me in that respect, of somebody that could overcome this and be successful anyway. Please don't start on a debate about whether or not Finding Neverland is true in the comments. I've had enough. No more of that, please. I'm just talking about where I was at this moment in time and what Michael Jackson was to me growing up. And honestly, his death was instrumental in my waking up too, because I saw the way that the witnesses treated it. Huh. This is a pretty good write-up. Wait a minute. Is this an apostate website? Ooh, scandal. What? United Nations NGO? Letter to Hitler? They changed the generation's teaching? What is going on? I continue on, and then I found this, which is part of what brought up this rant. This is an article about Michael Jackson's funeral, and this was a few years before I actually wrote this post, but it's basically an article about his Jehovah's Witness funeral, which really made me mad because he'd rejected them. He'd moved on to other faiths by this point. I continue, if Michael Jackson experienced anywhere near the kind of constant belittlement I did with the cult, I am extremely offended for him. For your entire life, you're not good enough for Jehovah's paradise, to the point of outright exile. Then you die, and suddenly they think they have the right to your private funeral. Suddenly you're good enough for paradise, even though you've been told your whole life that you weren't. Of course, they wasted no time in snatching up his children, who are apparently active Jehovah's Witnesses now. They are no longer, thank goodness. But yeah, as if they don't have enough forking up their childhood with their dad being Michael Forking Jackson, now the witnesses want to have their go at them too. And then I end this post by saying, so I'll say it here in case I never get around to writing a will before I die. I want nothing to do with the Jehovah's Witness funeral. If my father tries to make it happen, fight tooth and nail to prevent it. Everyone I know in that religion has made it clear they don't love me, and I've accepted that I don't need to love them either. If I go out of this world informing them that, this time, they're not good enough for me, then I've accomplished all I need with this life. So yeah, that was my first time really coming out against the religion. And I've come a really long way since I wrote that post back in 2011. It is now 2019. So in contrast to the 2000s, where I just kind of went wild and tried not to think about witnesses as much as possible, this decade has been about my growth as an ExJW, actually tackling the trauma and doing the work to overcome the damage and dismantle all of the problematic ways of thinking. And I'm still working on it. I still am. But I've done a lot to overcome it. I've hit this point. I started a YouTube channel and I started to get actually involved in the community 15 years later. So it's been a really great decade for me. From this post, which was 2011, already a couple years into the decade, I guess, up until the point where I am now, I'm really proud of myself. I had a good decade. And now we're coming up on the 20s. I can't believe it. Like, if you even mentioning the year 2020 to me as a child, it was just like such a foreign concept. It didn't make any sense to me because I never thought I would get this old. I didn't think I would, graduate high school, let alone make it to 2020. So here we are. If I had to choose a goal or a resolution for the next decade, it would be to redo basically what my life was like in the 2000s, but in a much better state. I've done the work now. I've dismantled a lot of it. I've deprogrammed myself. Now I want to get back to that point where I could live my life without ever thinking about Jehovah's Witnesses, not thinking about it day in, day out. To live my life the way I was supposed to live it from the beginning. That might mean giving up this channel at some point. It might mean changing the direction of this channel, talking about other things. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I still have some things I want to say about witnesses, so I have a whole decade to do it. We'll get there when we get there. But ultimately, for this next 10 years, I just wanted to end it with having moved on to bigger and better things. Maybe do that writing thing I always wanted to do, and they always told me I couldn't. Thanks for watching. Let me know how you did in the last decade. I imagine a lot of you had a pretty good one if you woke up from Jehovah's Witnesses. And also let me know what your goals or resolutions are for the next. Drop those in the comments below. I'm Germ, I'm mentally diseased, and I'll catch you in the next video. Happy New Year.